What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to the returning viewers, and if you're brand new here, welcome to Hobby Harvest. My name is Ken. So when exactly is the rut and what causes it? And that's what we're going to go over in this video. So I've been cruising around social media. There is all sorts of guys on there asking all sorts of questions this time of year. Obviously, things are heating up. And one of the big questions is, when does the rut start and what causes it? And there's a lot of good information out there. A lot of guys are giving some good information, but there's some bad information out there too. So I don't know who still believes that the moon phases cause the rut, but they do not cause the rut. So what the rut is caused by is how many hours of daylight there are during a day. So the rut is at the same exact time every single year, regardless of what the weather's doing, regardless of what the moon phases are, regardless of what other circumstances you might consider to have an effect on it. It is 100% the same time every single year. And the reason for that is because the does have to come into estrus for a very specific time of year in order for those fawns to be born at a very specific time of year so that they can survive the next winter. So the further north you are, so if you're like in that snow belt from like Duluth, Minnesota to Buffalo, New York, along the Great Lakes there, those does will come into estrus at a very, very specific time of year, usually right around Halloween, because they need to be bred at exactly that time. Because if they're bred too early, those fawns are going to be born into standing snow. There isn't going to be any cover for them, and they're most likely not going to survive being born too early in the spring. Now, on the other side, if those does are bred too late in the rut, or if the rut were later in those snow belt areas, then they're going to have the issue that those fawns are born later and they don't have a chance to put on body weight to survive the winter. Now, if there's a bad winter up there, you're still going to end up losing about 50% of those fawns and 50% of those 1.5-year-old deer in those snow belt areas. That's why the deer numbers can really take a hit with some bad winters up there. But the does do what they can to help those fawns survive those harsh winters by having them born at the ideal moment in the spring so that they aren't being born into snow and that they can put on as much body weight as possible before the snow comes again. Now, the further you head south, the more that opens up because the winters aren't as intense. So as you head into even southern Wisconsin, we get away from the Great Lakes a little bit. That area, you're going to see a rut that begins about the last week of October right now, and it's going to go until about the second week of November. So you're going to stretch that out from maybe a week to 10 days to like a solid 3-week period. Now, as you head further south into, like, say, southern Illinois, we're going to even open that up a little bit more. By the time you get down way south, their rut is very unpredictable and can be very specific to a region of their state, based on just historical data of when those does have been bred last year and so on and so forth. But the further north you get, the tighter it gets, and we're going to talk about exactly what that is and how that is affected in the rut and what exactly is happening during the rut. You know, and all of this is just based on years and years of me running trail cameras. I used to run trail cameras back when they were those big black boxes that held like 8D batteries. The things were just a mess to try to get out into the woods and get strapped to a tree. And you had really low quality photos from them too. But just running cameras this long, you can see that this is exactly when the rut happens every year. If you guys want to check out the cameras I use, I'll leave a link down in the description. You can go check that out. Now, even though that the rut is dependent on the time of year, the weather can still affect the deer movement during the rut. Now, it does not affect when those does come into estrus, but just like any time during the deer hunting season, the weather will affect their movement. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Now, the other thing is, if your rut is 10 days, 3 weeks, whatever it is, the front part of that, you're not going to see as much movement as you do at the tail end of your rut. And the reason for that is, at the very beginning of the rut, there are a lot of eligible ladies out there, and it's pretty easy for a buck to go out and find a doe. He doesn't have to travel all over the place trying to find that second, third, fourth doe that he may breed during the rut. So What you might see on your cameras is you have a buck, he's in the area, he's on your cameras every day, every couple days, whatever it is, and all of a sudden he disappears for a couple of days. Well, that is just like your buddy who's single, who's hanging out with you all the time, and all of a sudden he finds himself a lady and he just disappears for a while and you don't see him. Same thing here. That buck will go, he'll find that first doe, he will lock down with her, and you're not going to see him for a couple days on your camera while he breeds her, hangs out with her. Once he's done there, he's going to start cruising again. And now as more and more does get bred throughout the rut, there's going to be fewer and fewer of them left. So these bucks will have to travel further and further to find them. That's why you'll see more and more movement further into the rut than you do at the very beginning of it. So those bucks are just going to kind of stay in their home area, maybe find those immediate does that are bedding down in an area adjacent to them, maybe a mile away. It depends on your terrain and everything and density of cover in your area, but he's only going to go that first doe bedding area. He's going to find a lucky lady, and then after he does the deed with her, he will then have to travel further and further away to find number 2, 3, 4, however many he gets to during the rut. So that's when you're going to have that increased level of movement. So let's talk about the weather. So like I said earlier, the weather does not affect when those does come into estrus. It does not affect the time of year that the rut is, but just like any other time during the season, you definitely want to make sure you're hunting the backside of those cold fronts. So that is, cold front comes through, you see the temperature drop. Now it could drop from 80 down to 60, or it could drop from 60 down to 40. It doesn't matter. You're looking for that big drop in temperature. There's usually going to be a lot of wind when that pushes through. You want to hunt the next day after that. So let's say that cold front comes through on Wednesday. You want to be in the stand on Thursday. And you can hunt that morning, you can hunt that afternoon. Obviously be hunting more those thick layers of cover heading back to bedding area in the morning. Hunt near those food sources in the afternoon. And they will be moving more during the backside of those cold fronts, mostly because the does will be moving. They need to get to those food sources. They just had that temperature drop. They need to go put on some more calories because they just burned a bunch trying to stay warm. It's the same as you. If you're used to being out and it's 80 degrees every single day and all of a sudden you get a 60-degree day, you're going to be a little chilly. But if all of a sudden you have a 40-degree day and you're used to it being 40 every day and it jumps up to 60, you're going to think that 60 degrees is warm. So it's the change in temperature you're really looking for here. Now, the other thing you want to look for here is weather patterns like rain, wind, if it's storming out. So even though it's during the rut, that's really going to slow these deer down a bit if they're just out there in a thunderstorm. So you do want to hunt the backside of those storms. Anything that was out there that would have been rough to be out there living in it. So like a thunderstorm for maybe 12 to 24 hours, they are going to want to get up and move more after that storm. Those does are going to want to get to those food sources. Those bucks are going to want to get to those does. So you're going to see more movement even inside the rut when you hunt the weather during the rut. So hunt the backside of those cold fronts, hunt the backside of that inclement weather, and that's when you're going to see increased movement even during the rut, but also all throughout your deer season. So you can use this tip any time of season outside the rut even. Now, the other thing is if you do get those hot days, those bucks are still going to want to be cruising because it is the rut, but they are going to get hot. They are going to be wanting water. So if you can hunt over a water hole that you've put in, if you're on private property, if you can just hunt near a water source, you're going to really increase your chance of seeing that buck movement. So they will be out there moving because they're in the rut, but they do want to hit up water. Bucks will skip food. I've still seen them eat, at least grab a little bite here or there. They're not sitting on a food plot very long, but they'll grab a bite as they walk through it during the rut. But they will go to water during the rut, especially on those hot days. So like I said, hunt the backside of those cold fronts. You should be a little chilly out there in the stand because those are going to be the best days to hunt. And those bucks aren't going to need water as much on those days, but they still will be cruising on those hot days. They're just not going to make it as far because they're hot, right? So they're going to be looking for water, but looking for does. But on those cool days, you can imagine if you're a buck and you're going to put on a bunch of miles that day, it's going to be a lot nicer to do that on a cold day than a hot day. And those are the days that they actually will put on more miles, so they're more likely that you will see them. All right, if you guys feel like you got value out of this video, go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you've really enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy this one. Otherwise, go check out this one, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.